Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at this Darwin FPV ExpressLRS 15 amp all-in-one board. And I put that antenna on there so that you would know right away that no, it doesn't have one of those tiny little cube antennas, or it doesn't have a flat antenna like we've seen before. It's got a pretty large antenna. So this one won't be for your smallest of micro builds where you're trying to save weight. Unless you go with a different antenna, of course, because I think this probably weighs a gram and a half, 2 grams, but we'll weigh that up in just a second. I want to try to get this done fairly quick. So Darwin FPV has kind of made a name for itself here in the past year as kind of a budget-friendly sort of quad FPV sort of manufacturer, and they come out with this. And one of the things that caught me right away was I'm not crazy about having the capacitor pre-soldered. What if I wanted to use a different capacitor? What if I wanted to use it differently, orientate it differently here on the board? Yeah, so that's already soldered on there for us, which, if you don't mind that, part of the work's already done. But in this particular case, as you can see, there's no motor connectors and there's no VTX. So we are going to have to do some soldering on this. And by the way, the price on this comes in at $49.99. So comparable to what we've seen with more features from another board that we've seen on the channel here recently. Let's dive down to the desk. We'll take a quick look. They also have their Vantech DIY ExpressLRS. Now, I have not tested this other than to plug in the USB port on the bottom and to test that Wi-Fi does work. I didn't update it over Wi-Fi yet because, of course, ExpressLRS configurator doesn't have the Vantech in there already. This has got ExpressLRS installed, 2.0 installed by default, but it is an inexpensive module. And if you're on the Darwin FPV site, or you're shopping on a site for a board like this or this board, and you're thinking about maybe picking up a really inexpensive ExpressLRS transmitter just to test out, this claims it goes to 500 milliwatt. Now, my understanding of 500 milliwatt was it required a fan. This does not have a fan, it has a heat sink. So, something change? Am I just out in the cold on that? Because I thought 250 milliwatt was the limit unless you had a fan. I'm going to start right off with it does come with stickers. First, you get a little baggie of goodies. We get one single short length of black heat shrink voltage negative wires for your XT30, the XT30 motor connectors, gummies to place around your flight controller, some nuts, and some screws. It also comes with this, which I think is fairly interesting. We've seen this on an Emax product. I know it's translucent. It's hard to tell, but maybe I can get a little bit of a glare on there. So this would be a piece that you put on the bottom, presumably, and it would help protect in a case of a partial wet landing that may be due from grass or a nearby tiny little puddle, that our props wouldn't flick up a bunch of water and get on it from underneath. So that's something that they do include, which really, I think this probably only costs manufacturers, part of a penny to make. And so I think, give us this, because, if you want it, it didn't hardly cost them nothing. But if you need it, you can make your own, but that's a pain in the butt. So I like that, which is an odd thing. Now, the board's real hard to see, even if I zoom in. And my old eyes, I can't hardly read the silk screen on there. But thankfully, they've got this image on their website that makes it real easy. You can see it's got two full UARTs, RX2 and TX2, and then RX1 and TX1. We could use that for a DJI. Or air unit light, I guess they're now being called. Those are what we commonly called the Vistas for a long time. Or you could do HD0 on this as well. I think it's pretty appropriate for HD0 and micros, but you might do a DJI as well. 4.5 volts, that would get power via USB. So when you plugged your USB, which is on the other side of the board, this pad, the S-Bus pad would, or not the S-Bus, because that's S-Bus. This 4.5 volt pad, which would presumably mean your receiver gets voltage, so that would power up. And then we got 3.3 volt for DSMX and other sorts of receivers. We jump up here, we've got two more 5 volt pads. I don't know why we've got those so close together and so many, but okay, if we need them, we got them. And then we've got grounds to go with them. Ground is generally common. So if you get 5 volt over here and for whatever reason you want to use ground over here, you could do that. Then we've got our smart audio pad. I think behind this it says SA, and then we've got VTX cam. Down in here we've got our two buzzer pads. We've got B-, which is behind the yellow line, or excuse me, B+ is behind the yellow line, and B- over here. And this is kind of particular. I haven't seen this done on a wire map for an all-in-one or really any flight controller for the USB port, but they dictate this as 5 volt for and ground, and then we have our plus and minus for our USB. I'm not sure how we would use that. I don't have an experience trying to tap into stuff that's on the reverse side of the USB port, so that's a new one on me. Of course, we've got our UFL antenna, which I've already got connected, and then we've got the LEDs and the boot button here on the bottom. And this is one single programmable LED here on the bottom, and then we've got our blue LED here on the right-hand side. Let's go back to the board here, and I think it's worth noting that these are the pads to put your battery power leads on. They're kind of triangles here in the corner, and they are somewhat close to the USB, so you're going to want to be a little bit careful soldering those on, but you do have enough there to where if you're using, the gauge of wire or typical micro wire that we use, it should be fine on there. Also, the board, as you could see in the image previously, we've got an option to either solder them. I point out here for the soldering of motor wires, just because these pads are spaced out a little better, and it's going to give you a fighting chance of keeping the solder from bleeding over and causing you problems. And then you could use, as the silkscreen has the outline for the rectangles for the motor connectors if you wanted to use motor connectors. I'm going to plug in the USB port so you can get an idea what that light, how bright that is. This does not have a Wi-Fi antenna, so you cannot update this board over Wi-Fi. To my knowledge, there's only one board that has ExpressLRS integrated on it that does Wi-Fi updating, and that is the JHMCU, the cross style. I think it retails for also about $50-$60. So a little info there. I haven't had a lot of people giving me reports of using it. I have one. I haven't used it myself yet. But this gives you an idea about the flashing, the LED lights that it has. It's also worth noting that they use kind of a 2-layer stack. They use a top thin layer of the PCB and then a main PCB layer, which is fairly unique. I don't think I have seen all-in-one manufacturers do this. I have seen Darwin do this on theirs. I don't know if that's going to add any sort of performance or any reliability. Maybe it goes the other way. I just couldn't say. But I noticed that on the Baby Ape that I reviewed some time ago, that it also used an all-in-one board, and it had a little bit of a 2-layer stack on it. Let me take this antenna off, and let's weigh it up. Okay, so the antenna weighs 2¼ grams, which was about where I thought it was. I was a little bit light. I was giving it more credit than I should have, I guess. And then, well, let's weigh the board separately, make it easy for everybody. The board itself, with the capacitor that's already soldered on, is 5¾ grams, and that brings us to a total of just a touch over 8 grams. And the last thing to mention about this is it comes pre-installed with Bluejay, and that's pretty cool. It's nice to see Bluejay getting a little bit of day in the sun. If you're not familiar with Bluejay, Bluejay is a pretty flexible ESC firmware that allows us to do RPM filtering, so you won't have to flash anything to get your RPM filtering on this. It'll also allow you to run, say, 24 kilohertz if you want to go down to that, or 48 or 96, which if you're running really small motors like 0802, a lot of people like to run higher kilohertz on their ESCs in order to get some extra efficiencies. I leave mine stock. I think it's a little bit because I've gotten so used to the feel that when you raise those higher frequencies on your motors, they slow down slower. And that causes me a bit of a problem. So it's nice to see Bluejay kind of getting a day in the sun, and you can buy a product with Bluejay already on it. You don't have to worry about flashing the wrong firmware. It's already here. So that's kind of a nice feature. And at $49.99, pretty inexpensive for a board with 15 amps. It takes 1 to 3S. It's got Bluejay on it, so you can do RPM filtering. It's got ExpressLRS. Capacitor, I still have a hard time getting over that. I guess I could snip it off and reorient it if I wanted to, but I kind of feel like we're going to have to solder this board anyways. Just let us decide how the capacitor goes on there, or if we want the capacitor at all. Don't forget they have the Vantech module. It's not in the ExpressLRS configurator yet, so we don't know about how long that's going to take. And that's a gotcha I've read about on the Facebook, that some people are buying some of these new radios and modules that come out, and then they want to update them and put their passphrase in it, but they can't yet because the target isn't available for their particular product. So, some companies get their targets in there right away. Others, it takes more time. But as of this recording, the Vantech, this module that is $37.99, is not listed in the ExpressLRS configurator. So you would have to do traditional binding, and it is ExpressLRS version 2. So a couple looks at some budget, or, you know, Darwin FPV likes to go low cost on their products, so maybe it fits FPV very, very well, because I think in many cases, because we're crashing so much, some of us are cheapskates. I know I tend to be. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, yeah, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.